The clock on the Pentagon wall showed 9:47 p.m. when Major Damon Williams finally packed up his briefcase. Another long day of classified meetings about overseas operations was behind him. His dress uniform felt heavy after 14 hours of back-to-back sessions with top military officials. All he wanted now was to get home to his wife and two young daughters. Williams walked through the empty corridors of the Pentagon, his polished shoes echoing against the marble floors. Security guards nodded respectfully as he passed. They knew him well. He'd been coming here for 3 years now, ever since his promotion to the intelligence division. At 34, he was one of the youngest majors in his department, and everyone said he was destined for bigger things. The parking garage was almost empty. Williams climbed into his black BMW, a purchase he'd made after his last deployment bonus. He was proud of that car. It represented everything he'd worked for, a kid from the south side of Chicago who'd made it all the way to the Pentagon. His mother would have been so proud if she'd lived to see it. The drive from Arlington to Richmond usually took about 2 hours, but tonight the highways were clear. Williams loosened his tie and turned on some jazz music. The smooth saxophone helped him unwind from the stress of the day. He thought about his daughter's soccer game tomorrow morning. He'd promised to be there, and unlike so many military fathers, he actually kept those promises. As he drove through the Virginia countryside, Williams noticed how different his life had become from his childhood. Growing up in Chicago, he'd seen plenty of young black men get pulled over by police. Some of those stops ended badly. Really badly, but in his military uniform, Williams felt protected, respected. The uniform meant something in America. It said he was a servant of his country, someone who'd sworn an oath to defend the Constitution. Around 11:30 p.m., Williams entered the outskirts of Richmond. The city looked different at night, quieter, but somehow more tense. Streetlights cast long shadows between buildings. A few people walked the sidewalks, but most businesses were closed. Williams stayed on the main roads, following his GPS toward the interstate that would take him home. Meanwhile, across town, Officer Tony Rodriguez was having the worst shift of his month. 2 domestic violence calls, a bar fight, and a stolen car chase had left him exhausted and on edge. Rodriguez had been with the Richmond Police Department for 8 years, and lately every shift felt like a battle. Crime was up, public trust was down, and he was tired of being everyone's villain. The radio crackled to life, just as Rodriguez was thinking about getting some coffee. Unit 47, we have a reported robbery at 5th 10th and Main Street. Suspect described as a black male, well-dressed, driving a dark luxury vehicle, last seen heading north. Rodriguez sighed and picked up his radio. Unit 47 responding. He flipped on his lights and headed toward the area. Robberies in that part of town weren't unusual, but the description was pretty vague. Well-dressed black male in a luxury car could describe half the lawyers and doctors in Richmond. Williams was stopped at a red light about 6 blocks from where the robbery had supposedly occurred. He was checking his phone for messages from his wife when he noticed the police car pulling up behind him. The officer wasn't running lights or sirens, so Williams didn't think much of it. Police cars were everywhere in cities, but when the light turned green and Williams drove forward, the patrol car followed. Turn after turn, the police car stayed behind him. Williams felt that familiar knot forming in his stomach, the same feeling he'd had as a teenager in Chicago, when police cars would follow him for no reason. Rodriguez, meanwhile, was comparing the car in front of him to the robbery description. Dark BMW, check. Well-dressed black male, check. The car was even heading in the right direction from the crime scene. To Rodriguez, it seemed like an obvious match. He'd learned to trust his instincts on the street, and his instinct said this was his guy. Williams decided to pull into a well-lit gas station. If the officer was just going the same direction, he'd drive past. If not, at least there would be witnesses and security cameras. Williams had learned these survival tactics from his father, who'd learned them from his father before him. It was knowledge passed down through generations of black men in America, but Rodriguez saw the gas station stop as suspicious behavior. Why would an innocent person suddenly pull over? In his experience, guilty people always tried to avoid contact with police. He activated his emergency lights and pulled in behind the BM. Williams saw the red and blue lights flash in his rearview mirror, and his heart started racing. He'd been pulled over before, of course. Every black man in America had stories about traffic stops, but tonight felt different. He was tired, far from home, and carrying classified military documents in his briefcase. This could get complicated fast. Rodriguez approached the car with his hand resting on his weapon, standard procedure for nighttime traffic stops. Through the driver's window, he could see Williams reaching for something in the center console. In the darkness, Rodriguez couldn't tell what it was. "Keep your hands where I can see them," Rodriguez shouted, his voice sharp with authority. Williams froze. His military ID was in the center console, exactly where he kept it for situations like this. Showing his military credentials usually ended traffic stops quickly and politely. But the officer's aggressive tone made him reconsider. "I'm reaching for my identification," Williams said calmly, using the de-escalation techniques he'd learned in military training. "I'm a United States Army major." Rodriguez had heard every story in the book from people trying to get out of arrests. Military officer was a new one, but criminals were getting more creative. The man's expensive clothes and car suggested he might have money for fake IDs too. "I said keep your hands visible," Rodriguez repeated, now drawing his weapon. The situation was escalating faster than either man wanted. Williams slowly raised his hands, but he was confused and frustrated. In his uniform with his military bearing, this kind of treatment was rare. "Officer, there's been some misunderstanding. I'm coming from the Pentagon. I have my military identification right here in the console." The word Pentagon made Rodriguez even more suspicious. Who drives from the Pentagon to Richmond at midnight? And why mention it unless you're trying to sound important? In Rodriguez's experience, people who name-dropped government buildings were usually lying. "Step out of the vehicle slowly," Rodriguez commanded, his gun now drawn but pointed downward. Williams complied, moving carefully and deliberately. His military training kicked in: follow orders, stay calm, survive the encounter. He could sort out the misunderstanding later. As he stood beside his car, hands raised, Williams caught sight of his reflection in the car window. Still in his dress uniform, ribbons and decorations clearly visible. He looked exactly like what he was, a decorated military officer, but in the dim light of the gas station, with adrenaline pumping through both men, those details were lost. Rodriguez saw a well-dressed black man in a luxury car, matching the description of a robbery suspect. Williams saw a police officer who seemed determined not to listen. The security camera at the gas station recorded everything that happened. Next, the footage would later become the most important evidence in a case that would change everything for both men. Their families and the institutions they served, neither Williams nor Rodriguez knew it yet, but the next 60 seconds would transform a routine traffic stop into a national crisis that would reach the highest levels of government and military command. The phone call came at 2:47 a.m. General Patricia Hayes was deep in sleep when her secure military line started ringing. 28 years in the Army had trained her to wake up instantly when that particular phone rang. It only meant one thing: urgent military business that couldn't wait until morning. "General Hayes speaking," she answered, sitting up in bed and reaching for the lamp. The voice on the other end belonged to Colonel James Mitchell, the Pentagon's night duty officer. His tone was grave. "Ma'am, we have a situation. Major Damon Williams was shot by Richmond police about 3 hours ago. He's in critical condition at Richmond General Hospital." Hayes felt her stomach drop. Williams was one of her best officers, a rising star in military intelligence. More importantly, he was carrying classified documents related to Operation Silent Shield, a sensitive overseas mission that only a handful of people knew about. "What happened?" Hayes asked, already getting out of bed and reaching for her uniform. "Details are still coming in, ma'am. Appears to be a traffic stop gone wrong. Local police are calling it an officer-involved shooting. But here's the problem." Williams had his briefcase with him. "The one with the Silent Shield files?" Hayes closed her eyes. This was every military commander's nightmare. A decorated officer shot by police was bad enough for public relations. But classified documents potentially in civilian hands could compromise national security operations and put soldiers' lives at risk overseas. "Where's the briefcase now?" she asked. "Unknown, ma'am. Richmond PD secured the scene, but they're not exactly being cooperative with our people. They're treating this like a local police matter." Hayes was already putting on her uniform. "Get me a secure line to General Roberts at Joint Chiefs. And I want a team en route to Richmond within the hour. Full intelligence recovery protocol." "Already." "In motion, ma'am, but there's something else you should know. The officer who shot Williams, he's claiming self-defense. Says Williams was reaching for a weapon. Was he?" "Military ID, ma'am." Williams was reaching for his military ID. Hayes felt anger rising in her chest, but she kept her voice controlled. "I'll be at the Pentagon in 30 minutes. Have my staff assembled in Conference Room Alpha, and Colonel, this doesn't leave. I'll circle until we know exactly what we're dealing with." 45 minutes later, Hayes walked into the Pentagon's most secure conference room. Her key staff was already assembled around the polished oak table. Maps of overseas operations covered the walls, but tonight everyone's attention was focused on a small city in Virginia. Colonel Angela Chun, head of military intelligence security, was the first to speak. "Ma'am, I've reviewed Williams' assignment details. He was carrying intelligence assessments for 3 active operations. If those documents are compromised, how compromised are we talking?" Hayes interrupted. "Worst case scenario? We'd have to evacuate intelligence assets from 2 countries and abort a mission that's taken 18 months to plan. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars and potentially American lives." Hayes nodded grimly. This was bigger than just one officer getting shot. "What do we know about the Richmond Police Department?" Major David Park, the Pentagon's liaison officer, pulled out a thick folder. "Not much good, I'm afraid. They've had issues with federal cooperation before. 3 years ago, they refused to honor military jurisdiction in a domestic violence case involving one of our personnel. Last year, they arrested 2 Marines on leave, claiming they didn't recognize military IDs. So we're dealing with a department that has a history of problems with military personnel," Hayes said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am. And there's more." I pulled Williams' service record. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, exemplary conduct ratings. This isn't some troublemaker. This is one of our best. Hayes looked around the table at her staff. These were experienced military officers who dealt with international crises, terrorist threats, and war zones. But a local police department holding classified documents was uncharted territory. "What's Williams' condition?" she asked. Colonel Chun checked her secure tablet. 3 gunshot wounds, chest, shoulder, and abdomen. He's been in surgery for 4 hours. Doctors say it's touch and go. Family? Wife and 2 daughters? They're at the hospital now. Mrs. Williams is, understandably, upset. She's been asking questions about why this happened. Hayes knew that family questions would soon become media questions, and media questions would become congressional questions. The Pentagon needed to get ahead of this story before it spiraled out of control. "Okay, here's what we're going to do," Hayes said, standing up. "Colonel Chun, I want you personally in Richmond within 2 hours. Your mission is to secure those documents and assess the threat to our operations. Take whatever personnel you need." "What about local police cooperation?" Chun asked. "You're not asking for cooperation. You're exercising federal authority. Those documents belong to the United States military, and any civilian agency holding them is creating a national security risk." Major Park raised his hand. "Ma'am, Richmond PD isn't going to like federal agents showing up demanding evidence from an active police investigation." Hayes smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. "Major, the Richmond Police Department just shot one of our officers while he was carrying classified military intelligence. Whether they like our response is no longer my concern." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what the general was saying. The Pentagon was about to go to war with a local police department. What about the media? asked Captain Lisa Torres, the Pentagon's public affairs representative. We stay ahead of the story, Hayes replied. I want a full press release ready within 4 hours. We emphasize Williams' exemplary service record, his family, and the fact that he was performing official military duties when this happened. And the officer who shot him, we stick to facts. Officer Rodriguez has a history we're investigating, but we let the facts speak for themselves. Hayes looked at her watch. It was now 4:15 a.m. In a few hours, this story would be national news. But the Pentagon had advantages that local police departments didn't. Resources, authority, and the full backing of the federal government. Colonel Chun, before you leave for Richmond, I want you to pull every interaction Richmond PD has had with military personnel in the last 5 years. Traffic stops, arrests, complaints, everything. If this is part of a pattern, we need to know. You think this wasn't just a random incident? Chun asked. I think a decorated Army major doesn't get shot while showing his military ID unless there are deeper problems. And if there are deeper problems, the Pentagon is going to solve them. The meeting continued for another hour, with staff assignments and protocols being established. But the message was clear: the Pentagon was not going to treat this as just another police shooting. One of their own had been attacked, classified documents were at risk, and the full weight of the United States military was about to come down. On Richmond, Virginia. As the meeting ended, Hayes remained in the conference room, staring at William's service photo on her secure tablet. Bronze Star recipient, father of 2, dedicated soldier. He'd served his country with honor overseas, only to be shot by police in his own homeland. The irony wasn't lost on her. Williams had survived combat zones in Afghanistan and Iraq. He'd faced enemy fire and lived to tell about it, but a traffic stop in Virginia had nearly killed him. Hayes made a mental note to call the Secretary of Defense as soon as his office opened. This situation was about to become a test of whether the Pentagon would protect its own people, and General Patricia Hayes had no intention of failing that test. Police Chief Robert Sullivan had been sleeping peacefully when his phone rang at 3:15 a.m. 30 years on the force had taught him that calls this early usually meant big trouble, but nothing could have prepared him for what Sergeant Mike Thompson told him. Chief, we've got a situation. Officer Rodriguez shot someone during a traffic stop. The guy's in critical condition at Richmond General. Sullivan sat up in bed, rubbing his eyes. Okay, walk me through it. Was Rodriguez in danger? Did the suspect have a weapon? That's where it gets complicated, Chief. The guy Rodriguez shot. He's military. Army major says he was reaching for his military ID. Sullivan felt his stomach drop. Police shootings were always messy, but shooting military personnel was a public relations nightmare. Please tell me we have good video footage of this. There was a pause on the other end. That's another problem, Chief. Rodriguez's body camera malfunctioned. Says it stopped recording right before the shooting. What about the dash cam? Working, but the angle doesn't show everything clearly. And Chief... there's something else. The major was carrying some kind of government briefcase. Military guys are already asking questions about it. Sullivan was fully awake now. He'd been Richmond's police chief for 8 years, and this was shaping up to be the worst crisis of his career. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't let anyone talk to the media. And make sure Rodriguez writes his report exactly as it happened. Already working on it, Chief. By the time Sullivan arrived at headquarters, damage control was already underway. Rodriguez sat in an interview room, looking shaken and exhausted. His union representative, Detective Frank Morrison, was already there taking notes. Morrison had been protecting officers from internal affairs investigations for 15 years, and he knew exactly what needed to be done. Tony, I know this is hard, Morrison said, patting Rodriguez on the shoulder. But we need to get your story straight. Before Ia starts asking questions, tell me exactly what happened. Rodriguez rubbed his face with his hands. I got a call about a robbery, black male in a luxury car. I spotted this BMW that matched the description perfectly. When I tried to stop him, he acted suspicious, pulled into a gas station instead of stopping right away. Good, that shows. Consciousness of guilt, Morrison nodded, writing notes. What happened during the actual stop? I approached the vehicle and asked for identification. The suspect started reaching into his center console. In the darkness, I couldn't see what he was reaching for. I feared for my safety and discharged my weapon. Morrison looked up from his notes. Did you give him commands to stop reaching? Absolutely. I told him multiple times to keep his hands visible. He ignored my commands and continued reaching. Perfect. That's self-defense. What about his claims that he's military? Rodriguez shrugged. Anyone can claim to be anything. I've had people tell me they're FBI agents, CIA, even Secret Service. Criminals will say whatever they think will get them out of trouble. In another part of the building, Chief Sullivan was meeting with his senior staff. Captain Lisa Henderson, head of Internal Affairs, spread out the preliminary evidence on the conference table. What do we have? Sullivan asked. The official story is that Rodriguez feared for his safety when Williams reached for an unknown object. The shooting appears justified under department policy, Henderson replied. And the video evidence? Like I said, the body camera malfunctioned. The dashcam shows the stop, but the crucial moment is partially blocked by the police car's position. Sullivan studied the grainy dashcam footage on Henderson's laptop. The video quality was poor, and shadows made it difficult to see exactly what happened. What about the gas station's security cameras? We're working on getting that footage. But it's an older system, might not be clear enough to change anything. Detective Morrison joined the meeting, having finished coaching Rodriguez through his statement. Tony's report is ready for review. Clean self-defense shooting. Suspect matched robbery description, acted suspiciously, ignored commands, and reached for unknown object in dark vehicle. Sullivan read through Rodriguez's report carefully. On paper, it looked like a textbook justified shooting. The only problem was the man Rodriguez shot was a decorated Army major carrying classified military documents. What's our exposure here? Sullivan asked his legal advisor, Attorney Karen Walsh. If we stick to the facts as Rodriguez reported them, we should be fine legally. Officer believed he was in danger, suspect was non-compliant, and the shooting was within policy guidelines. And the military angle? That's where it gets tricky. Military personnel don't get special treatment under civilian law, but the public relations impact could be significant. At 6:30 a.m., just as Sullivan was feeling like they might control the situation, everything changed. A convoy of black SUVs pulled up to the police station. Men and women in military uniforms stepped out, led by a stern-looking colonel who walked like she owned the place. Colonel Angela Chun didn't bother with pleasantries when she entered Sullivan's office. Chief Sullivan, I'm Colonel Chun from Pentagon Intelligence. We need to discuss the Williams shooting. Colonel, I appreciate your concern, but this is an ongoing police investigation. I can't discuss details with outside agencies. Chun smiled, but her eyes remained cold. Chief, Major Williams was carrying classified military intelligence when your officer shot him. This stopped being just a police matter the moment those documents were involved. Sullivan felt the ground shifting under his feet. What are you saying? I'm saying the Pentagon has jurisdiction over those documents and anything related to them. That includes the circumstances under which they were compromised. Now wait just a minute, Sullivan said, standing up. This happened in my city, involving my officer. You can't just waltz in here and take over. Chun pulled out an official document with military seals. Actually, Chief, federal law is very clear about protecting classified information. Your department is now holding evidence that belongs to the United States military. Over the next hour, tensions escalated rapidly. Pentagon investigators requested access to the crime scene, Rodriguez's report, and all video evidence. Sullivan's team pushed back, claiming local jurisdiction and active investigation status. We're not trying to interfere with your investigation, Chun explained, though her tone suggested otherwise. We're trying to protect national security information. And we're trying to protect the integrity of a justified police shooting. Morrison, the union representative, fired back. Chun raised an eyebrow. Justified? A decorated war veteran gets shot while showing his military ID and you're calling it justified? He matched the description of a robbery suspect, Henderson interjected. Officer Rodriguez followed proper procedures. What robbery? Chun asked. Because our preliminary investigation shows no robbery was reported in that area last night. The room fell silent. Sullivan looked at Henderson, who looked at Morrison, who suddenly seemed very interested in his notes. Chun continued. In fact, it appears the robbery call that initiated this traffic stop may not have existed at all, which raises interesting questions about why Major Williams was really stopped. Sullivan realized his department was in serious trouble. If there was no robbery, then Rodriguez had no legitimate reason for the traffic stop. And if the stop was unjustified, then everything that followed would be scrutinized under a microscope. I think we need to pause this conversation, Sullivan said. I'm calling the city attorney. You do that, Chief, Chun replied, standing to leave. But understand something. The Pentagon protects its people. And when someone attacks one of our officers while he's carrying classified information, we consider that an attack on national security itself. As Chun and her team left the building, Sullivan slumped in his chair. Rodriguez's routine traffic stop was turning into a federal case involving classified documents, potential civil rights violations, and military intelligence operations. Morrison tried to stay optimistic. Chief, we've handled police shootings before. The Union will back Rodriguez, and if we stick to our story, this will blow over. But Sullivan wasn't so sure. In 30 years of police work, he'd never seen Pentagon colonels personally investigating a local shooting. And he had a sinking feeling that Colonel Chun wasn't the type of person who let things blow over. As news vans started gathering outside the police station, Sullivan realized that the next few days would determine not just Rodriguez's career, but the future of the entire Richmond Police Department. The Pentagon was clearly preparing for war, and Sullivan wasn't sure his department was ready for that kind of fight. The first news van arrived at Richmond General Hospital at 7:30 a.m. By noon, there were 17. Camera crews lined the sidewalk while reporters practiced their opening lines. This wasn't just another police shooting. This was a story that had everything. Military hero, questionable police tactics, and a Pentagon investigation that nobody fully understood yet. Inside the hospital, Dr. Angela Williams sat beside her brother's bed, holding his hand while machines kept him alive. She'd driven 4 hours from Atlanta the moment she got the call. As a successful civil rights attorney, she'd handled plenty of police brutality cases. But seeing her own brother connected to tubes and monitors was different. This was personal. The doctors say he's stable now, she told her sister-in-law, Rebecca, who hadn't left the hospital since the shooting. But he's still critical. The next 24 hours will tell us everything. Rebecca looked exhausted. Her eyes were red from crying, and she'd been wearing the same clothes since the phone call that changed their lives. The girls keep asking when Daddy's coming home. What am I supposed to tell them? Before Angela could answer, a nurse appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Williams? There are reporters downstairs asking for a statement. Hospital security is keeping them out, but they're persistent. Angela stood up, her attorney instincts kicking in. I'll handle them. Angela, no, Rebecca said. I don't want this to become a circus. Rebecca, it's already a circus? The question is whether we're going to let them tell our story or if we're going to tell it ourselves. 20 minutes later, Angela Williams stood in front of the hospital, surrounded by microphones and cameras. She'd changed into a professional suit and carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd spent years fighting in courtrooms. My name is Dr. Angela Williams, and I'm speaking on behalf of my brother, Major Damon Williams, and his family. Last night, my brother was shot 3 times by Richmond police while showing his military identification during a traffic stop. The crowd of reporters erupted with questions, but Angela raised her hand for silence. Major Williams is a decorated Army officer with 15 years of service. He's a Bronze Star recipient who served 3 tours overseas defending this country. He's a father of 2 young daughters who was simply driving home from work at the Pentagon when this happened. She paused, letting that sink in. The officer who shot him claims my brother was reaching for a weapon. The weapon was my brother's military ID card. The same ID that's gotten him through Pentagon security every day for 3 years. Dr. Williams, what do you want to see happen? Shouted a reporter from Channel 12. Justice, Angela replied simply. My brother dedicated his life to serving this country. He survived combat zones in Afghanistan and Iraq. He should be able to survive a traffic stop in Virginia. Meanwhile, at the Pentagon, General Hayes was preparing for the most important press conference of her career. The Secretary of Defense had given her full authority to handle the situation, and she intended to use every bit of that authority. The Pentagon press room was packed with reporters from every major news outlet. Military reporters who usually covered overseas operations found themselves asking questions about domestic police tactics. The story was unlike anything they'd covered before. General Hayes walked to the podium in full dress uniform, her decorations and ribbons telling the story of a distinguished military career. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone used to commanding thousands of soldiers. Good afternoon. I'm here to discuss the shooting of Major Damon Williams by Richmond police. Major Williams is a valued member of our intelligence community and a decorated veteran of overseas operations. She looked directly into the cameras. When one of our service members is attacked while performing official duties, the Pentagon takes that very seriously. We are conducting a comprehensive investigation into this incident, and we will use every resource at our disposal to ensure accountability. A reporter from the Washington Post raised her hand. General, are you saying the Pentagon doesn't trust local police to handle this investigation? Hayes chose her words carefully. I'm saying that when classified military documents are involved, and when one of our officers is shot while carrying those documents, federal jurisdiction takes precedence. We have responsibilities that extend beyond local law enforcement capabilities. What kind of classified documents? Pressed another reporter. The specific nature of the documents cannot be discussed for national security reasons. But I can tell you that Major Williams was performing official duties when this incident occurred. The questions came rapid fire. Why was Williams in Richmond? Was this related to terrorism? How often do police shoot military personnel? Hayes handled each question with military precision, giving enough information to satisfy media curiosity while protecting operational details. But her message was clear. The Pentagon was not going to let this slide. Back in Richmond, Police Chief Sullivan was facing his own media storm. His press conference was smaller but no less intense. Local reporters who'd covered the police beat for years were asking questions they'd never had to ask before. Chief Sullivan, can you confirm that Officer Rodriguez's body camera malfunctioned during the shooting? Asked the lead reporter from the Richmond Times. I can confirm that we're reviewing all available video evidence as part of our investigation, Sullivan replied, sticking to his prepared statement. But specifically, did the body camera work or not? Sullivan felt sweat forming on his forehead. Technical equipment sometimes experiences malfunctions. That's why we have multiple recording systems. Chief, the Pentagon says there was no robbery in the area where Major Williams was stopped. Can you explain why Officer Rodriguez thought he was pursuing a robbery suspect? This was the question Sullivan had been dreading. Officer Rodriguez responded to information he believed was reliable. Police officers make split-second decisions based on the information available to them. So there was no robbery? The investigation is ongoing. I can't comment on specific details. The press conference was going badly and Sullivan knew it. Every answer made his department look worse, while every question revealed new problems with their official story. Later that evening, the real bombshell dropped. Colonel Chin called another Pentagon press conference, this time with specific announcements. That sent shockwaves through law enforcement circles nationwide. Effective immediately, Chun announced, the Department of Defense is suspending all cooperative agreements with the Richmond Police Department pending the outcome of our investigation. The room full of reporters wasn't sure what that meant. Practically, Chun explained, Richmond PD will no longer have access to federal databases, federal training programs, federal equipment grants, or federal intelligence sharing. Any Richmond officer attempting to enter military installations will be denied access. A reporter from CNN asked the obvious question, "Colonel, isn't this federal overreach? Local police have jurisdiction over local crimes?" When local police shoot federal agents carrying classified information, it becomes a federal matter, Chun replied. Major Williams wasn't just a citizen, he was a federal agent performing official duties. The attack on him was an attack on federal operations. Are you calling this terrorism? Chun paused for effect. I'm calling it what it is, an attack on a federal agent that compromised national security operations. The Pentagon takes such attacks very seriously, regardless of who perpetrates them. The implications were staggering. The Pentagon was effectively declaring war on a local police department. Federal funding, federal cooperation, and federal support were all being withdrawn. For a department that relied heavily on federal programs, this was devastating. That night, as news programs across the country led with the story, public opinion began to shift dramatically. Social media exploded with hashtags supporting Major Williams and questioning police tactics. The contrast was stark, a decorated war hero fighting for his life, while the Pentagon accused local police of compromising national security. Dr. Angela Williams appeared on 3 national news programs that evening, each time delivering the same powerful message. Her brother had served his country with honor overseas, only to be shot by police in his homeland, but perhaps the most powerful moment came when she read a letter from Major Williams' 7-year-old daughter. Daddy always said police officers are heroes like soldiers. Why did heroes hurt my daddy? The question hung in the air, unanswered and heartbreaking. As the media coverage intensified, it became clear that this case would test everything Americans believed about police, military service, and justice itself. 3 days after the shooting, Colonel Chun sat in a conference room at the FBI field office in Richmond, surrounded by boxes of files that painted a disturbing picture. What had started as an investigation into one police shooting was revealing a pattern that went back years. "Show me the Peterson file again," Chun said to Agent Lisa Crawford, the FBI's civil rights investigator who'd been assigned to help with the Pentagon's investigation. Crawford pulled out a thick folder marked with red tape. Jerome Peterson, age 29, Navy petty officer. Stopped by Officer Rodriguez 2 years ago for suspicious behavior outside a convenience store. Peterson was buying groceries after his shift at the naval base. What happened? Rodriguez claimed Peterson matched the description of a burglary suspect. Peterson showed his military ID, but Rodriguez said he thought it was fake. Peterson ended up face down on the pavement with a dislocated shoulder. Chun shook her head. Charges? Dropped when the base commander got involved. But Peterson transferred to another state shortly after, said he didn't feel safe in Richmond anymore. Any pattern with Rodriguez specifically? Crawford opened another file. 5 complaints in 8 years, all involving African American service members. 2 Marines, 1 Army specialist, 1 Air Force sergeant, and now Major Williams. Every single complaint was buried by internal affairs. Chun studied the pattern. It wasn't random traffic stops or split-second decisions. It was systematic targeting of black military personnel. What about other officers in the department? That's where it gets interesting, Crawford said, pulling up a computer screen filled with data. We analyzed 5 years of traffic stop data from Richmond PD. Black drivers are stopped at 3 times the rate of white drivers. But black drivers in military vehicles or wearing military uniforms, 5 times the rate. Someone's been tracking this? The CLU submitted a report to the City Council 18 months ago. It was buried in committee. Chun felt her anger building. This wasn't about one bad officer making a mistake. This was about institutional racism targeting the very people who'd sworn to defend the country. Meanwhile, Pentagon tech specialists were uncovering evidence that Richmond police had tried to hide. Specialist Tommy Park, a former Army cyber operations expert, was going through the digital evidence with the precision of someone trained to find hidden enemy communications. Colonel, you need to see this, Park said, calling Chen over to his computer setup. I've been analyzing the gas station's security system. I thought the footage was too poor quality to be useful. That's what Richmond PD claimed. But they never actually enhanced the video properly. Park clicked play on his screen. Watch this. The enhanced footage was crystal clear. Jen could see Major Williams' hands throughout the entire encounter. She could see him reaching slowly into his center console while clearly announcing his intentions. Most importantly, she could see Rodriguez drawing his weapon before Williams had even touched anything. How did you get this quality? Standard military-grade enhancement software. Any police department with a decent tech budget could have done this analysis. They chose not to. Chun stared at the screen. The video completely contradicted Rodriguez's official report. It showed a calm, compliant military officer being shot for no legitimate reason. There's more, Park continued. I pulled Rodriguez's radio communications from that night. Remember how he said he was responding to a robbery call? Yeah, here's every radio transmission from Richmond Dispatch that night. Park played a series of audio files. Notice anything missing? Chun listened carefully to 20 minutes of routine police radio traffic. Traffic stops, welfare checks, domestic disturbances, but no robbery call anywhere near where Williams was stopped. So where did Rodriguez get the idea there was a robbery? That's the million-dollar question. Either Rodriguez made it up to justify the stop, or someone told him something that's not in the official records. The investigation was revealing that the shooting wasn't just excessive force. It might have been completely fabricated from the beginning. Back at Richmond General Hospital, Major Williams was finally showing signs of improvement. He'd been awake for short periods, though still heavily sedated. Dr. Angela Williams hadn't left his side, coordinating with Pentagon investigators while managing her brother's medical care. The doctors say he's going to live, she told Colonel Chun during one of their regular phone calls. But there might be permanent damage, his left arm ... They're not sure he'll regain full mobility. How's his mental state? Angry, confused. He keeps asking why this happened to him. 15 years of military service, and he gets shot by police in his own country while showing his military ID. June understood that anger. She'd felt it herself when she first read Williams' service record. Bronze Star for valor in combat, Purple Heart for wounds received in action, countless commendations for intelligence work that helped save American lives overseas. And now he was fighting for his life because a Richmond police officer decided he looked suspicious. Dr. Williams, there's something you should know. We found evidence that your brother wasn't the first military person targeted. By this officer, Angela felt her attorney instincts kick in. What kind of evidence? A pattern going back years? Your brother was specifically targeted because he was black and military. This wasn't random. Are you saying this was intentional discrimination? I'm saying the evidence suggests systematic targeting of African American service members by Richmond PD. We're building a federal civil rights case. That evening, Angela Williams called another press conference. This time, she wasn't alone. 5 other military families stood behind her, each with their own story of harassment by Richmond police. 2 years ago, my son was slammed to the ground by Officer Rodriguez outside a grocery store, said Patricia Johnson, mother of Navy Petty Officer Jerome Peterson. My son was buying dinner after a 12-hour shift defending this country. Rodriguez said he looked suspicious. Another parent stepped forward. My daughter was pulled over 6 times in 3 months after she started wearing her Army uniform to drive to the base. 6 times for routine checks. She's never even gotten a speeding ticket. Angela looked directly into the cameras. What happened to my brother wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern of targeting black service members. People who volunteered to defend this country are being attacked by the very police departments they're protecting. The press conference sent shockwaves through military communities nationwide. Social media exploded with stories from service members sharing their own experiences with police harassment. The hashtag #ProtectOurTroops began trending as active. Duty and veteran military personnel shared similar stories from across the country. At the Pentagon, General Hayes was fielding calls from military commanders around the world. The Williams case was becoming a symbol of something much larger, the treatment of minority service members in their own country. "Ma'am, we're getting reports from bases nationwide," reported Colonel Chun during their evening briefing. Service members are afraid to wear their uniforms off base. They're scared of police interactions. Hayes felt the weight of command responsibility. Her job was to protect American service members from foreign enemies. She'd never imagined having to protect them from domestic police departments. "What's our next move?" Hayes asked. "We have enough evidence for a comprehensive federal civil rights investigation. Not just Rodriguez, but the entire Richmond PD culture. Pattern of discrimination, systematic targeting, institutional racism. And Williams? He's going to testify. When he's strong enough. His testimony, combined with the evidence we've gathered, should be enough to bring federal charges." Hayes nodded. The Pentagon had declared war on Richmond PD and they were winning. But the victory felt hollow when she thought about Major Williams lying in a hospital bed, his military career possibly over because a police officer decided he looked dangerous. "Colonel, I want you to expand this investigation. If Richmond PD has been targeting military personnel, I want to know if other departments are doing the same thing." "This stops now." "Yes, ma'am." "We're already reaching out to other installations?" As the investigation expanded, it became clear that the Williams shooting had opened a door that law enforcement couldn't close. The Pentagon was using its full authority to protect its people, and police departments across the country were about to learn what happened when they targeted American soldiers. General Hayes stood at the podium in the Pentagon's largest press room, facing cameras from every major news network in America. Behind her hung the flags of all military branches, and beside her sat the Secretary of Defense himself. This wasn't just another military briefing. This was a declaration of war against police departments that targeted American service members. Today, the Department of Defense is taking unprecedented action to protect our military personnel from systematic discrimination by civilian law enforcement, Hayes announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to commanding respect. She held up a thick document bound in official military covers. "This report details a comprehensive investigation into the treatment of military personnel by the Richmond Police Department. What we found is disturbing, systematic, and unacceptable." In the audience, reporters leaned forward. Everyone knew this was history in the making. Effective immediately, the Department of Defense is severing all relationships with the Richmond Police Department. This includes the immediate termination of federal funding, federal training programs, equipment, grants, and intelligence sharing agreements. The room erupted with questions, but Hayes raised her hand for silence. Furthermore, Richmond Police Department personnel are permanently banned from all military installations in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Any Richmond officer attempting to enter military property will be arrested by military police. At Richmond City Hall, Mayor Jennifer Thompson watched the press conference with growing horror. The Pentagon wasn't just punishing the police department, they were punishing the entire city. Richmond received over $12 million annually in federal police funding. 3 major military installations employed thousands of city residents. The economic impact would be devastating. "How much federal money are we talking about?" she asked her budget director, Kevin Walsh. Walsh looked pale as he flipped through his emergency calculations. "Directly to the police department, about $4 million annually, but that's just the beginning. The military bases contribute nearly $200 million to our local economy. If service members can't interact with our police, if contractors can't get security clearances, we're looking at economic disaster," the mayor finished, but General Hayes wasn't done. "The Department of Defense is also releasing a classified security assessment of the Richmond Police Department that we conducted 18 months ago." She nodded to Colonel Chun, who distributed copies of a previously secret report to the stunned reporters. This assessment, conducted by military intelligence, found systematic patterns of racial bias in Richmond PD's treatment of military personnel. "We documented 47 separate incidents of discrimination against African American service members over a 5-year period." CNN's Pentagon correspondent raised her hand. General, why is this report being released now? And why was it classified? In the first place, Hayes looked directly into the camera. This report was classified because we hoped Richmond PD would address these issues internally. They did not. Instead, the discrimination escalated to the point where one of our decorated officers was shot while performing official duties. In Richmond, Police Chief Sullivan sat in his office watching his career implode in real time. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since the Pentagon's announcement. City council members, federal contacts, and his own officers were all demanding answers. He didn't have. Detective Morrison, the police union representative, burst into Sullivan's office without knocking. Chief, we've got a rebellion on our hands. Half the department is talking about quitting. They can't get federal security clearances anymore, which means they can't work private security jobs. Officers with military backgrounds are furious. They're being banned from visiting their own bases. Sullivan rubbed his temples. What about Rodriguez? Tony's falling apart. His lawyer says the Pentagon's evidence makes it impossible to defend. They have video, audio, digital records. Everything we said didn't exist. And the union's position? Morrison sat down heavily. Officially, we support our officers. Unofficially? Tony's radioactive. No one wants to be associated with this mess. Meanwhile, the Pentagon's strategic offensive was expanding beyond Richmond. General Hayes had authorized similar investigations at every major military installation in the country. The message was clear: law enforcement agencies that targeted military personnel would face the full weight of federal retaliation. At Fort Bragg in North Carolina, the base commander received reports that local police had stopped 17 African American soldiers in the past month, all for questionable reasons. At Naval Station Norfolk, investigators found that black sailors were 3 times more likely to be arrested during off-base incidents than their white counterparts. But the Pentagon's most devastating weapon wasn't financial pressure, it was information. Military intelligence analysts began sharing their findings with civil rights organizations, creating a coordinated campaign that no police department could withstand. Dr. Angela Williams, now serving as the unofficial spokesperson for military families affected by police discrimination, appeared on every major news program. Her message was simple but powerful. American service members who risked their lives overseas shouldn't have to fear police in their own country. My brother survived 3 combat deployments, she told a packed auditorium at Howard University. He earned a Bronze Star for courage under fire. But he almost died in a gas station parking lot in Virginia because a police officer decided he looked dangerous. The audience erupted in applause, but Angela wasn't finished. The Pentagon is doing what we should have done years ago, protecting our troops from domestic threats. Because that's what racist police officers are, domestic threats to American service members. The speech went viral within hours. #domestic threats began trending on social media as thousands of military families shared their own stories of police harassment. Back in Richmond, the economic pressure was becoming unbearable. Local businesses that depended on military customers were reporting massive losses. Defense contractors were relocating operations to avoid the federal blacklist. Even the city's credit rating was downgraded as rating agencies worried about Richmond's ability to service its debt without federal support. Mayor Thompson called an emergency city council meeting. The chamber was packed with angry residents, police officers, and military families. The divide was stark: uniforms on one side, badges on the other. We need to face reality, Thompson told the council. The Pentagon isn't backing down. They have unlimited resources and the moral high ground. We have a police department that shot a decorated war hero. Councilman Robert Chun raised his hand. What are our options? 3 choices, Thompson replied. We can fight the Pentagon and watch our city go bankrupt. We can surrender completely and fire everyone involved. Or we can negotiate. What would negotiation look like? Thompson looked around the room. Complete reform of the police department, federal oversight, firing of anyone involved in the Williams case, and probably compensation to every military family that was discriminated against. The room erupted in shouting. Police supporters accused The Council of Betraying Law Enforcement. Military families demanded justice for years of abuse. City council members tried to maintain order while calculating the political cost of any decision, but perhaps the most powerful moment came when Mrs. Rebecca Williams, Major Williams' wife, stood up to speak. The room fell silent as she approached. The microphone, still wearing the same clothes she'd been wearing for days at the hospital. "My husband volunteered to serve this country when he was 18 years old," she said, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying clearly through the packed chamber. "He missed birthdays, holidays, and school plays because he was deployed overseas protecting American freedoms." She paused, gathering strength. "He came home from Afghanistan with shrapnel in his leg and nightmares about friends who didn't make it back, but he never complained. He said serving America was worth any sacrifice." The room was completely silent now. "But I never thought the sacrifice would include being shot by police. While showing his military ID, I never thought my daughters would have to visit their father in a hospital bed because a police officer decided he looked suspicious." She looked directly at Chief Sullivan. "You want to talk about supporting our troops? Then stop letting your officers attack them." As Rebecca Williams returned to her seat, the political reality became clear. The Pentagon had unlimited resources, moral authority, and public support. Richmond had a police department that had shot a war hero and then tried to cover it up. The next morning, Mayor Thompson announced that Richmond would accept federal oversight and begin immediate police reforms. Officer Rodriguez would be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and Chief Sullivan would resign effective immediately. The Pentagon had won its war against Richmond PD, but more importantly, they had sent a message to every police department. In America, the military protects its own, and anyone who threatens American service members will face consequences they never imagined. 6 weeks after the shooting, Major Damon Williams sat in a wheelchair in the federal courthouse in Richmond, facing the man who had nearly killed him. Officer Tony Rodriguez looked smaller somehow, no longer wearing the police uniform that had given him authority over life and death. Instead, he wore an orange jumpsuit. His hands cuffed in front of him as federal marshals led him to the defendant's table. Williams had insisted on attending the arraignment despite his doctor's concerns. His left arm was still in a sling, and he moved slowly, but his mind was sharp. He wanted to look Rodriguez in the eye when the charges were read. "The United States of America versus Anthony Rodriguez," announced Federal Judge Patricia Hayes, no relation to the Pentagon general. "The defendant is charged with deprivation of rights under color of law, a federal civil rights violation, and attempted murder of a federal agent." Rodriguez's lawyer, an expensive criminal defense attorney paid for by the police union, stood to enter a plea. But before he could speak, something unprecedented happened. Rodriguez himself stood up. "Your Honor, I want to change my plea to guilty," the courtroom erupted. Rodriguez's lawyer grabbed his arm, whispering frantically, but Rodriguez shook him off. "I shot an innocent man," Rodriguez said, his voice barely audible. "I let my prejudices cloud my judgment, and I almost killed a war hero. I'm guilty." Williams felt a mixture of surprise and validation. For weeks, Rodriguez had maintained his innocence, claiming self-defense and following police union talking points. But the weight of evidence, the Pentagon's investigation, and the public scrutiny had apparently broken through his defenses. Judge Hayes restored order and scheduled sentencing for the following month. As Rodriguez was led away, he looked directly at Williams for the first time since the shooting. The two men's eyes met for just a moment, and Williams saw something he hadn't expected, genuine remorse. Outside the courthouse, Dr. Angela Williams addressed a crowd of reporters and supporters. The steps were packed with military families, civil rights activists, and ordinary citizens who had been following the case for weeks. "Today, Officer Rodriguez admitted what we've known all along. He shot my brother because of racial bias," she said. "But this case was never just about one officer. It was about a system that allowed and even encouraged the targeting of black service members." Behind her stood representatives from military families across the country who had come to Richmond for the hearing. They held photos of their loved ones, soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who had experienced similar discrimination. "This is Sergeant David Johnson," said Patricia Williams, holding up a photo of her son in his Army dress uniform. "He was tasered by police in Texas while trying to show his military ID. This is Lieutenant Amy Thompson, beaten by officers in California who said her military credentials were fake. This is Corporal James Lee, shot with a rubber bullet during a peaceful protest where he was trying to protect other demonstrators." The stories continued for 20 minutes, each one representing a family that had suffered because police officers saw a threat instead of a protector. The Pentagon's investigation had uncovered hundreds of similar cases nationwide, creating a database of discrimination that could no longer be ignored. 2 days later, Major Williams made his first public appearance since the shooting. Walking slowly but steadily, he entered the House of Representatives to testify before the Committee on Armed Services. The hearing room was packed beyond capacity, with overflow crowds watching on screens in adjacent rooms. Committee Chairman Robert Davis gavelled the session to order. "Major Williams, thank you for your service to our country, and thank you for your courage in appearing before us today." Williams adjusted the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces: congressmen, military officials, reporters, and families affected by police discrimination. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 6 weeks ago, I was driving home from the Pentagon after a routine day of work. I was wearing my dress uniform, carrying classified documents related to ongoing military operations. I was pulled over by Officer Rodriguez for allegedly matching the description of a robbery suspect." Williams paused, gathering his thoughts. The room was completely silent. There was no robbery. The Pentagon's investigation confirmed that Officer Rodriguez fabricated the entire justification for stopping me. I was targeted because I was a black man driving an expensive car in Richmond, Virginia. Congressman Michael Chun from California leaned forward. "Major Williams, in your 15 years of military service, including 3 combat deployments, had you ever experienced anything like this?" "Congressman, I've been shot at by enemy forces in Afghanistan and Iraq. I've survived IED explosions and rocket attacks. But I never felt as helpless as I did lying on that pavement in Richmond, watching Officer Rodriguez stand over me with his gun drawn, knowing that he had shot me for no reason other than the color of my skin." The emotional weight of his testimony was overwhelming. Several committee members wiped their eyes, and the gallery was completely silent except for the clicking of camera shutters. "Major Williams," asked Congresswoman Lisa Rodriguez from Texas, "what changes do you think need to be made to prevent this from happening to other service members?" Williams had been thinking about this question for weeks. "Ma'am, I believe we need federal legislation that makes attacking military personnel a federal crime with mandatory minimum sentences. I believe we need the Pentagon to have oversight, authority over local police departments that interact with military installations. And I believe we need to treat attacks on service members as attacks on national security." But Williams wasn't finished. "Most importantly, we need to acknowledge that what happened to me isn't rare. The Pentagon's investigation found similar cases at military installations across the country. Black service members, Latino service members, Asian service members, all targeted by police who see our skin color before they see our uniforms." The hearing continued for 4 hours with testimony from Pentagon officials, civil rights leaders, and other military families. But the most powerful moment came at the end, when Williams was asked what he wanted people to remember about his case. "I want people to remember that American service members volunteer to protect the Constitution," he said. "We swear an oath to defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. But we never imagined that some of those domestic enemies would be wearing police badges." 3 weeks later, the sentencing hearing for Officer Rodriguez drew national attention. The federal courthouse in Richmond was surrounded by protesters, supporters, and media from around the world. Inside, the courtroom was divided, police supporters on one side, military families on the other. Federal prosecutors had recommended 15 years in prison, citing the severity of the civil rights violation and the attempted murder of a federal agent. Rodriguez's defense team argued for leniency, pointing to his previously clean record and his admission of guilt, but Judge Hayes had reviewed every piece of evidence in the case, including the Pentagon's classified security assessment that revealed Rodriguez's pattern of targeting black service members. "Mr. Rodriguez," she said, looking directly at the defendant, "you were entrusted with the authority to protect and serve the public. Instead, you used that authority to target and attack the very people who volunteered to defend our nation." She held up Williams' service record. "Major Williams has served this country with honor for 15 years. He has risked his life in combat zones to protect American freedoms. And you shot him because you decided he looked suspicious." The judge paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the courtroom. "This court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are permanently barred from working in law enforcement, and you will pay restitution to Major Williams for his medical expenses, lost wages, and pain and suffering." As Rodriguez was led away in chains, Major Williams felt a sense of closure he hadn't expected. Justice hadn't healed his physical wounds or erased the trauma of being shot by police, but it had sent a message that would resonate throughout law enforcement. Attacking American service members would have consequences. Outside the courthouse, Dr. Angela Williams announced the next phase of their fight. "Today's sentence is just the beginning. We're filing federal lawsuits against every police department that has targeted military personnel. We're pushing for federal legislation to protect service members. And we're working with the Pentagon to ensure this never happens again." The Williams case had become more than just one family's fight for justice. It had become a symbol of institutional change, proving that when the Pentagon decided to protect its people, no local police department was powerful enough to stop them. 6 months after the shooting that changed everything, Major Damon Williams walked through the Pentagon corridors with a slight limp and a new purpose. His left arm still didn't move quite right, and he'd probably never regain full strength from the nerve damage. But his mind was sharper than ever, focused on a mission that felt more important than any he'd undertaken in combat. Zones overseas. The nameplate on his new office door read Lieutenant Colonel Damon Williams, Director of Military Civilian Law Enforcement Relations. His promotion had come with the new assignment, leading a Pentagon initiative that no one had imagined would be necessary just months earlier. Williams sat behind his desk, reviewing reports from military installations across the country. The numbers told a story of systematic change. Police complaints against military personnel had dropped by 60%. Discriminatory traffic stops near military bases were down 75%. And for the first time in decades, military personnel reported feeling safer during interactions with civilian police. Colonel Williams? His assistant, Sergeant First Class Patricia Johnson, knocked on the open door. "General Hayes is here for your monthly briefing." General Hayes entered the office, noting how much Williams had recovered since those dark days. In the hospital, he moved carefully but confidently, and his eyes held the determination of someone who had found his true calling. "How are you feeling, Damon?" she asked, using his first name as she always did during their private meetings. "Better every day, ma'am. The physical therapy is helping, and honestly, this new assignment gives me energy I didn't know I still had." Hayes smiled. She'd personally recommended Williams for the promotion and the new position, knowing that his experience and credibility would be crucial for the difficult work ahead. "Tell me about the Richmond situation," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. Williams pulled up a file on his computer. "Complete transformation, ma'am. Chief Sullivan resigned, as you know. The new chief, Maria Santos, is a former military police officer who served 2 tours in Iraq. She's implemented every reform we requested, and the results? Night and day difference. Military personnel report feeling welcome in Richmond for the first time in years. The new training protocols we developed are working. Most importantly, there hasn't been a single complaint against Richmond PD involving military personnel since the reforms began." Hayes nodded approvingly. The Richmond model was being replicated at police departments across the country, often under threat of losing federal funding and military cooperation. What about Officer Rodriguez? Williams' expression grew more serious. Adjusting to federal prison, according to his lawyer. But there's something interesting. He's been writing letters to military families, apologizing for his actions and the actions of other officers. Dr. Williams thinks he's genuinely changed. Your sister's assessment carries weight, Hayes said. Dr. Angela Williams had become a national advocate for police reform, using her legal expertise and her brother's story to push for change at the highest levels of government. Williams stood up and walked to his window, which overlooked the Pentagon parking lot where military personnel from all branches work side by side. Ma'am, I've been thinking about something. Rodriguez wasn't born a racist. He wasn't trained to hate military personnel. Somehow, the system taught him to see people like me as threats instead of protectors. And now we're changing that system. Hayes replied. Yes, but it's bigger than just police training. We're changing how America thinks about military service, about race, about justice itself. Their conversation was interrupted by Williams' secure phone. Colonel Williams, you have an urgent call from the White House, Sergeant Johnson announced. Williams looked at General Hayes, who nodded her approval. He picked up the secure line. Colonel Williams speaking. Colonel, this is Chief of Staff Jennifer Thompson. The President would like to meet with you next week to discuss the Military Personnel Protection Act that Congress is considering. Williams felt his heart skip. The legislation, inspired by his case, would make attacks on military personnel federal crimes and give the Pentagon oversight authority over local police departments near military installations. Of course, ma'am, I'm honored. The President specifically requested you because of your unique perspective on both sides of this issue, as a victim of police violence and as an architect of the solution. After the call ended, Williams sat back down, still processing what had just happened. A year ago, he was a mid-level intelligence officer focused on overseas operations. Now, he was being invited to the White House to discuss legislation that could protect military personnel nationwide. Congratulations, Damon, General Hayes said. But don't let it go to your head. The real work is just beginning. She was right. Williams' department was currently working with 43 police departments across the country, implementing reforms and monitoring compliance. The Pentagon's threat to withdraw federal cooperation had proven remarkably effective at motivating change. Later that afternoon, Williams drove to Richmond General Hospital for his regular physical therapy appointment. The route took him past the gas station where he'd been shot, and he still felt a knot in his stomach every time he passed it. But today was different. Today, there was a new sign in front of the gas station. Welcome military personnel. Thank you for your service. At the hospital, Williams worked with the same physical therapist who had helped him learn to walk again after the shooting, Dr. Michael. Park was a former Army medic who understood the unique challenges of treating combat veterans. Range of motion is improving, Dr. Park noted as Williams worked through his exercises. But more importantly, how are you handling the stress of your new position? Better than I expected, Williams replied. There's something healing about turning a personal tragedy into institutional change. Every police department we reform, every military family that doesn't have to go through what mine did, it gives meaning to what happened to me. And the nightmares? Williams paused his exercises. The PTSD from the shooting had been as challenging as the physical recovery. Less frequent, but they're still there. Sometimes I dream about Rodriguez standing over me with his gun. Other times I dream about all the military families who went through this before me, who didn't have the Pentagon's support. That's normal, Damon. Survivor's guilt combined with the responsibility you feel for other victims. But remember, you didn't choose to become a symbol. You just chose what to do after it happened to you. That evening, Williams returned home to his family for the first time in a week. His daughters, now 8 and 10, ran to hug him carefully, mindful of his still healing injuries. His wife, Rebecca, had aged years in the past 6 months, but she'd also found her own strength, becoming an advocate for military families affected by police violence. How was Washington? Rebecca asked as they sat down for dinner. Productive. The White House wants to discuss the legislation next week. His younger daughter, Sophie, looked up from her plate. Daddy, are you famous now? William smiled. Not famous, sweetheart. Just trying to help other military families stay safe. Like how soldiers protect people overseas. Exactly like that, but here at home. After dinner, William sat in his study, reviewing reports from military installations across the country. The data was encouraging, but he knew the real measure of success wouldn't be statistics. It would be whether military personnel could wear their uniforms with pride and safety. In their own communities, his secure computer chimed with a new message. It was from Colonel Chun, who was now overseeing similar programs at installations worldwide. Damon, thought you'd want to see this. Received a letter today from a young Marine who was stopped by police in California last week. Instead of harassment, the officer thanked him for his service and escorted him safely to the base. The officer specifically mentioned the Williams protocol we developed. You're changing lives, one traffic stop at a time. Williams leaned back in his chair, feeling a sense of accomplishment he'd never experienced in his previous military assignments. Hunting terrorists and analyzing intelligence had been important work, but this felt personal. This felt like the mission he was meant to do. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Angela Williams. Saw the news about the White House meeting. Mom would be so proud of how you've turned this nightmare into something positive. Williams looked at the photo on his desk, his mother in her nurse's uniform, taken shortly before she died. She'd always told him that real strength came not from avoiding hardship, but from how you responded to it. As he prepared for bed, Williams reflected on the journey from that gas station parking lot to the Pentagon's most important new initiative. Officer Rodriguez had shot him because he saw a threat. But Rodriguez was now serving 12 years in federal prison. While Williams was serving his country in a new way, the Pentagon had kept its promise to protect its people. Police departments had learned that attacking military personnel carried consequences they couldn't imagine, and military families across the country were safer because one decorated officer had survived an encounter that should have killed him. Williams turned off his office light and headed upstairs to his family. Tomorrow, he would continue the work of ensuring that no oath